Alrighty.
Alright, let's start.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone. This is another webinar of RavenDB. Here I have Søren. He's going to talk about how they're using RavenDB. Let's start, Søren.
So my name is Søren, and I'm going to talk a little bit about RavenDB today and how we used it for search in uCommerce. Do you see my my beautiful slides here?
Yes, I can see it. Great.
Perfect. All right, guys. So my name is Søren, as I mentioned. Before I sort of introduce myself some more, I'll talk to you about, a little bit about what we'll look at today. I know there'll be a Q&A at the end of this thing here, so so keep the questions in mind, and we'll get around to them at the end of the session. Is that all right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So today we're talking about, first we'll do the intro, so I'll introduce myself and uCommerce, so you know sort of the context of what we're talking about today. Then I'll dive into why we actually chose RavenDB for what we did, the solution, and some of the lessons we learned, because I feel like those might be interesting for you guys as well. So as I mentioned, my name is Søren, and I'm an e-commerce guy. I've done e-commerce for more than 10 years at this point. I've spent all my professional career doing e-commerce, and uCommerce is basically an e-commerce platform that my company did. I'm a Microsoft MVP for the past 4 years, and I'm a user group founder too. So so I've been around. uCommerce is an e-commerce platform. So this is the product that is actually using RavenDB. uCommerce as a platform is integrated with a couple of CMS systems, Umbraco and Sitecore, both of which have quite a big bit of traction in the market today. Finally, uCommerce is built using a framework first principle, basically using all the neat design principles, solid and all those type of principles to build this framework to do e-commerce on. And before we actually get into it, I thought I might share with you what it looks like, so you got to sort of get a visual context of what we're talking about. So as you can see, we're dealing with products. We're dealing with lots of products, millions of products from time to time. So we needed to come up with something that would fix that. So the challenge for us is basically when we're dealing with large product catalogs, it gets kind of difficult for a customer to actually find the product they're looking for. So imagine you browse to a website. Imagine you're looking at a bunch of products. Maybe it's clothing, so you're looking for maybe a particular size, a particular color. How do you actually find that thing without actually going through the entire list of products there? The solution is called Faceted Search. Many of you may know it already. Faceted Search is basically just a way of extrapolating valid search values based on the information that's present in the catalog. And it might look like this, right? So this is Marks & Spencer with a bunch of facets over here to the left. Do you see my mouse pointer moving around?
Yes, yes, I can see it.
Excellent. So these are the facets. So size would be a facet, fit, style, and so on and so forth. And as you click, mark off these particular facets, the product list will narrow down to the products you're looking for. So if you're looking for a size 4, for example, that would show only products in that. So you can think of it as an and search almost in this stuff here. Now we wanted to build this stuff into uCommerce as a platform and provide that as a sort of a standard feature in our framework. So so we needed to go and look for a search engine. We had some requirements for that. So basically, the platform we chose needed to have a faceted search engine, obviously. The reason I have it here on the slide is basically because we looked at a bunch of different things, dedicated search engines, document databases, a bunch of other things. And some of these have a faceted search engine, some of these don't. So if you could get that out of the box, that would be awesome. uCommerce is a multilingual e-commerce platform, so it supports lots of languages out of the box. It'll sort of localize catalogs to the various markets that you're sort of providing products in. So we needed to support multiple languages for facets and values. So the facet would be the size, and the value would be a size 4, 5, and 6, for example. Now for colors, for example, you would want color, and you would want red, green, and blue, and you would have something else in German, something else in Danish. So that just needs to be reflected based on the language the customer is actually shopping in. It needed to support multiple price lists, so products could actually, so you could facet on multiple different prices. So again, a price would just be like color and size, but it would be in different currencies. It would be different values based on what the price actually is. And the last point here, the user configured fields here, I've sort of underlined because that's really, really important. So uCommerce supports a fluid schema for products. So for any given product type, you can actually go and define new fields on that. So it looks like this. So if you have a shirt here, right, you can go and create new fields, so color, size, color, and a bunch of other things. These are fields that are created by users, so it was really, really important for us that these fields could actually be promoted to become facets like this. So just a little check mark, and that would actually promote this particular field to be part of the search results. Now, I'll get back to dynamic fields in just a little bit, but it's sort of a central thing and a central theme for our users of RavenDB. Now, the next section here will be about why we actually went with RavenDB. You could also call it why didn't we go with Solr or Lucene. For those of you who don't know, Solr is sort of the gold standard for faceted search. Lucene is for, of course, full text search, but also it has some faceted search capabilities. But there's a good reason why. The first reason is basically I really like the documents, a document view of the world. Basically, what we wanted was something that we could use for more than just search. We wanted something that could be used in the future for more stuff. And I'm going to cover that at the end of the presentation here, so you sort of get a sense of where we could actually take this because we've gone down this route here. Now the next part, what I really like about the document model is that Raven sort of views the world like this. You have a sort of a central data store for your documents where everything goes. This is almost like SQL Server, right? This is where you would put everything else, all your product information, categories, catalogs, all that sort of stuff. And on top of that, you build a number of indexes. What's cool about this is that each index is sort of tailor-made for each of the scenarios that you want to support. So for faceted search, for example, you would build a faceted search index that sort of promotes the fields that are selected in the particular index. And also you could sort of create a language-specific index for discounted products. Basically, they work almost like a view in SQL Server. And this split between the index and the actual data is really, really cool because when you put your data into the document store here, these indexes are basically updated automatically based on that information on a background process. So you don't have to worry about indexes being up to date. It'll just sort of happen over time. Now, the next thing here is uCommerce is deployed in a bunch of different deployment models. Shared hosting, lots and lots of sites on the same box. This is typical for low-end deployments. It's hosted in Windows Azure as websites, for example, and it's almost like shared hosting, but not quite. It has some other requirements. And also we're deployed in dedicated server environments. So we were looking for a solution that would actually allow this. If you look at a product like Solr, for example, that's a full app server that you need to run on its own box. So we couldn't deploy it sort of seamlessly and automatically as part of uCommerce. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have Lucene.net, which is deployable in a shared hosting environment. It's basically just a data file. But we couldn't actually scale that up and support multi-server web farm scenarios. So you have sort of both ends of the spectrum, Solr, which is a server that can be scaled out but can't be installed in a shared hosting environment, and Lucene.net, which is at the opposite end of the spectrum, where basically you have to roll it out as a data file, and sort of sharing it out is difficult. Sitting right between those two guys, we have RavenDB, which supports basically all these deployment models out of the box. So you can operate in embedded mode. which is awesome for us because we can just basically roll it out and use it for simple scenarios without having to do any configuration at all. Or if you need to scale out the search layer, you can actually host it as a service or a website by itself, or you can basically just scale it out like any other website. So really, really cool. And basically, we haven't seen any other products that can do this. MongoDB, for example, won't do this, and a bunch of other options doesn't have these flexibilities. So RavenDB was pretty awesome. Another criteria that we looked at is the fact that it's link-based. Indexes in Raven are created via link, so it's sort of a very familiar kind of thing for us. And it's sort of, I call it .NET centric because it's basically it can be used in other scenarios, but it's sort of .NET first. So it was sort of a nice choice for the team here that knows a lot about link and C# already in advance here. Another aspect that was kind of interesting is the fact that it's, I use the word self-managing. It's not quite true, but basically what happens is as you run custom queries against RavenDB, it'll sort of create indexes on the fly that matches those queries. If it sees the same query over and over again, it will basically create an index for that dynamically. This is really cool for us because uCommerce is because it's built using this framework first approach that I talked about. We basically can't tell how end customers will work with the product. So having something that can accommodate these many different types of use cases is really important. So Raven could give us some of that. So that was a win too. And finally, I'm not sure if you could call a person a feature. But I would say Oren is quite a big feature of RavenDB. I have tremendous respect for what he does. We've worked for many years with in Hibernate, and we know he knows what he's talking about. So I feel like a product that comes from his hand is really something you want to take a second look at. So now let's look at the solution here. So we had to come up with something that would accommodate those requirements that I talked about: multilingual capabilities, multiple indexes, the ability to promote custom fields. But we also had to work with the existing infrastructure that uCommerce employs. uCommerce is already deployed in many websites globally, so we had to sort of look at what we had out of the box and what customers were already using and go with that. So first we had to sort of establish what is the truth? Where is the data master? So we talked about replacing SQL Server outright or keeping SQL Server around, but we ended up with sort of a happy medium where the truth is basically stored in SQL Server. So all the UI updates, all that sort of stuff is pushed to SQL Server first, so that holds the ultimate truth. And then we sort of migrate data from SQL Server to RavenDB via a sort of a normal indexing process, something you would do with Solr and Lucene too. We just copy data from SQL Server to RavenDB, basically using a concept we already have in uCommerce. We call it a pipeline. It's basically just a set of steps that you can configure to react to events, basically. And what it means is that we push data. It means that we basically have a two-tier model in Raven. So we have the documents as before, so those would be your products, your prices, your price lists, all that sort of stuff, all stored in a central location. And on top of that, our data migration process also builds automatically indexes that matches all the configured languages in the CMS in question. So if you configure a new language in Umbraco, that particular language will be sort of automatically raised up to be an index in RavenDB too. So what it means is that you have sort of your localized views of different types of different languages of the products here. So they're ready to go for faceted search. Now I talked about dynamic fields, and one thing, so when you have a scenario where customers can create dynamic fields, it's important to keep in mind that these guys here are a little different from what Raven usually does. So Raven is really good at working with strong types, so a customer object, an order, a product, stuff like that. But when time comes to actually work with dynamic stuff where you don't know what the actual structure of a thing is until you get to runtime, you have to sort of accommodate that in a special way in RavenDB. So remember this slide here. So basically what it boils down to is a dictionary versus .NET type thing here. So as you create these fields here, you have to sort of reflect that in your indexes, in your search processes. So yeah, basically it can look completely different for different types of products. So a shirt, for example, will look different from a shoe and from an accessories, depending on what the customers want. So what we had to sort of add into this model here that I showed you before is we had to really think about the document structure for products, for example, because products and product properties will take up a lot of space potentially. If you have hundreds of thousands of products, it will be sort of a significant amount of data. So having your documents designed just so you don't use too much space is really important. Also, transmitting these documents over the wire, the size of the document actually affects that. So it's really important that you try and minimize your doc sizes. We sort of went with a full-blown design of our product document right off the bat, and we just see that it, as they became bigger and bigger, performance sort of started to dip a little bit. So we had to sort of make the documents a little more lean, and a good way to do it is by using dictionaries for these dynamic aspects. So basically a key value type thing, which melds really well with RavenDB because it's a JSON store, right? So it's, yeah, a dictionary just translates directly to the document here. The second phase of it was the indexes here. So indexes are created via link syntax, so it's really straightforward. But when time comes to deal with dynamic fields, there are actually two things that will be your friends in there, and one of them is called create field. This is a way to basically create a field in the index which doesn't correlate directly to a strongly typed field. And load document is an awesome way of sort of referencing information from different documents if needed. So what we end up with is a structure where a normal index would look like this, right? So you define your index for the fields that you want. So you just basically reference all your fields, all the strongly typed fields, and that's good. It's easy. It's simple to work with, but it doesn't really accommodate the dynamic fields. So in order to do that, you have to make it a little more complicated. So we have from before the statically typed properties here. But then you go and sort of aggregate your properties and use this create field method here to create a key value type thing that will be sort of a field in your index. Also, it's kind of important to realize that when you do this, the document that you get back is different from the actual index entries. So when you look at an index, you need to sort of turn on the options to show you what the actual values of an index is, to sort of realize what's going on and why your queries may be failing. Now, if you imagine this is a sort of a very simple scenario where you're just using your key values right out the bat, but we needed sort of a version where the key would be localized. So basically what we're doing is we're referencing multilingual information for keys depending on language. So if we needed the name for color, for example, in Danish, we would go to a reference table and look that up and bake that right into the index. The advantage of doing that is it's really, really fast. You don't have to go and sort of modify the data after the fact. You don't have to go and look up those keys every time. It's just sort of baked it directly into the index, so you get sort of maximum performance on that. It also means that when time comes to query this information, you need to sort of deal with that in a slightly different way that you may be used to. So type properties, I call that easy peasy because basically it is. You just basically go and use the link syntax as you're familiar with from any other link provider. But when you come to custom fields, you have to go and sort of use a little more advanced API here. And the way you do it is basically by using the same link syntax here and then using the customize method here, which will sort of let you get at the guts of a query. So you see here, rather than using the strongly typed fields, you're using keys, and these would be actual keys in the index. So it also opens up for doing much more sort of advanced and/or scenarios and sort of tailor making your query. This is also where, if you want to go with full text search, that you can go and use those capabilities of Raven. So just something to keep in mind. Now we felt like this might not be sort of the most easy way to deal with facets, so we went ahead and built an API on top of that. We call it an faceted queryable of product. And basically we have a little class that exposes the same thing as you saw before. It has the type safe approach, but it's then combined with the customization of a query. So you basically start out with a link query, get sort of to where you want to go, and then you add on the dynamic aspects of the query. So the facets here would be a list of strongly typed facet classes that are then converted to the query. So sort of a nice way to sort of almost stay in the strongly typed world, almost. Good. So based on that, we learned a couple of things, and I'd like to share that because some of it was surprising, some of it we sort of expected, but I feel like this might be interesting for you guys to learn as well. So when we started out using RavenDB, we had never worked with a document database before, basically. So we had to sort of go and learn all the sort of paradigms that are associated with document design. And the first thing is that document database design can be a frustrating exercise. Not because it's hard, it's really not, but the thing is you have to sort of let go of all your preconceptions of how you actually go and deal with the database. So all of us have sort of been using SQL servers and relational databases forever, right? So all the techniques of designing a database properly and normalizing it and all that sort of stuff are sort of ingrained in the way that we work, and letting go of those principles can be a little frustrating and a sort of a hard experience to come by. But it is also it is also liberating in a sense to when you finally let go of it. Now I will say this though, even though you let go, having sort of the relational concept, you still need it because you basically have to reference data from time to time. A good example for us is basically we have these dynamic properties which are described in a different document, and we can't really share that information between documents. So when time comes to find field names, when time comes to localize the fields, it wouldn't really do to store all that stuff in your product document. So they have to be somewhere else shared across products. So of course, but luckily Raven has some capabilities to go and reference that information as part of your query, so you can basically use that load document method I showed you before to actually pull in a set of related documents anyway. So you almost get the best of both worlds, to relate some of the relational capabilities of SQL Server and the awesome performance of Raven. That's actually the second thing we found. Performance is amazing if you get it right. You have to really think about how your documents will be used. You really have to sit down and think through all the scenarios to get there. But we saw massive performance improvements over SQL Server for our scenarios at least, and I think the reason is we're dealing with so many dynamic entities basically, where customers go and define their own fields, and that is sort of traditionally something SQL Server is really bad at. But a document a document database is basically a really nice fit for that. So so really, I'm very happy with this. I think the lowest performance increase we saw was around 30%, but most of the time Raven just blew SQL Server away for sort of front-end type queries. Another thing is the dynamic fields that we talked about. They really complicate matters. It does make things a little harder. For a product like uCommerce, which is a standard e-commerce platform, we don't really know how it's used, so we have to support a concept like dynamic fields. I think for more sort of one-time solutions, for customer-specific solutions, for example, something like RavenDB will really improve productivity in development teams, because you know what your model will look like, you know how it'll be used, so it's really easy to create a strongly typed model that'll just work for your scenario. So this may be something that's unique to a product like uCommerce. So I wanted to illustrate the pit of success here. So I'm not sure if this is actually a pit, but maybe. So RavenDB is sort of sold under the moniker "safe by default," and I call it mostly a good thing, because it does sort of help with a lot of the scenarios which are traditionally hard to deal with in a product like in Hibernate or Entity Framework, but it does also mean that it's very opinionated in the way it approaches things. So, for example, paging will be part of your next app if you go and use something like Raven, because by default you can only bring back 120 documents. You can increase that, or you can use a different API to stream in all your your data, but you will have to sort of deal with some of these safe by default conventions that are in there, which are 90% a good thing and maybe 10% I don't quite agree with, but hey, such are the terms. So just know that you will be dealing with some of these things here. Now for us, it's natural to sort of ask what's the next step, and for now we've just deployed uCommerce 4, which includes RavenDB as a search engine, and we're sort of waiting to see what our customers feel like about the product. But we are hoping to actually leverage a lot more going forward. So the first natural question is, should we ditch SQL Server? And I sort of went into it with sort of the hope that we actually could, because I really like the premise of a product like RavenDB. But then reality sort of hits, and we sort of started to realize that there are a lot of IT departments out there that know how to deal with the SQL Server, how to do backups, how to do performance tuning, all that sort of stuff. All the techniques for doing that are basically baked right into IT organizations out there. Whereas RavenDB is completely new and probably unknown to most of these guys. So I don't think we can ditch SQL Server just yet, but we may be able to do the next best thing here. So what we're actually looking at this point is using this two-tier model that I showed you before, with the truth being stored in SQL Server and then data being pushed to RavenDB. And we're hoping to leverage that for our front-end APIs. So basically people building websites using uCommerce will actually use data coming from RavenDB as opposed to from SQL Server. So we can actually leverage all that nice performance benefits that Raven gives us. So that's for the future. That's for an upcoming version of uCommerce. But basically, it would mean that you could go and create indexes that fit exactly with what you do and get that awesome full-text search and awesome performance. Basically, if I were to sum up the sort of the entire experience with RavenDB, I can do that with just one slide here. It's basically just all rainbows and unicorns. It's been an awesome experience to work with it. I see a lot of potential in a product like RavenDB for us, and I definitely see us using it much more going forward. And with that, you can get in touch with me on SSL@ucommerce.net or via Twitter, which is @ucommerce.